Hey, so I realized when I finished up the last video that I kept saying, oh, I'll get to that in a sec, and I never got to it. So I wanted to make sure that all the last things are wrapped up about this getting started with TinaCMS stuff. One of the first things that will be well, first let's grab the code. So you can go to GitHub and just grab it like this, and clone it, and npm install. And this takes a while. We already did this before, but if you're starting fresh, you can have like a head start and have everything all done for you. Okay, so let's talk about a few things that are currently missing. So one thing is, if we let's start this up and refresh. All right, so if we look here, one thing that I think is going to really confuse users is they'll see this image button, but we don't want them to use this image button. We want them to use our embed image that we created. That's better. And there isn't like a good API for hiding and showing elements on this rich text editor. The Tina team is working all the time. They're just implementing a massive amount of features, and I know that it's on their list. So eventually there'll be some API for that, but I think they just need to work it out, and people are discussing it right now on GitHub, so you can go check it out. But for now, we can just use like a kind of a hack, right? So this is part of my site. Even though it's Tina, it's not like in an iframe or something weird. It's just built into the site. So if you use CSS on your own site, you can do whatever you want to attach to that. So let's hide this button using CSS. Now again, this is a terrible hack, but it will work for now. So, oh boy. Let's open this up here. Again, you can use any editor, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to add a new file, and I'm going to paste in this magical thing. Now, this is kind of a weird selector, and you'll notice that I'm using lots of direct child selectors here. And that makes it so it won't like accidentally hit something else. It won't accidentally like hide something else. You can see what that looks like if you open up your DevTools and you do document query selector all, and then the selector that you're trying to choose. And I do this a lot just to make sure that I'm not doing anything really bad. Just to make sure that like this only finds one button, and it's going to hide it, and it won't hide anything else. So when I do this, it gives me a list of all the things that would affect, and you can see that it only gave me one, and there's the one item right there. And when I highlight over it, it like shows it right there. So there we go. So we know that's a pretty good selector, and it's not over selecting. It's not taking too much. If we did that with if we removed any of these children things, like direct child things, we start running the risk of getting more stuff. Here, let's try just getting rid of this. Well, that still only grabs one. I seem to remember that there was something in here, like maybe this one. Oh, I don't know what it was. There was something. Oh, it was in here. Okay, so this ends up getting two items if you have this menu open. So that's an example of over selecting. So we want to make sure that we're not being too general with our selector, because this would end up hiding header 3, which is not what we want. So yeah, just keep that in mind. When you're doing these kind of hacks, you want to be really careful about your selector and make sure you're being very specific. So we've got that. Now in Next.js, let's call this style. It's just going to be like our global style sheet. I have one for everything. Now in Next.js, there's a file in pages _app that basically wraps around everything. And this is another way that you can do layout. So currently we're wrapping layout around everything in here, but you could do it in here. That's another option. instead of just doing Tina provider, I could put all the stuff that I put in layout just around this, and every time it renders anything, it will do that. But we don't need to do that right now. All we need to do is import the CSS. So let's grab style.css. Okay, so now it grabs this one file, and if we refresh over here, you'll see now the image is gone. So the only way to add an image is by doing it properly with our embed thing. Now, again, eventually we're going to be able to modify the toolbar with an API, and we'll be able to hide things or take things that are embedded and move them over here so it looks more official. That's great, but for now, this will work. All right, so that was the first thing. The second thing is I kind of brushed over adding like more types of rich text editor embeds, but I didn't really talk about like the specifics of that or like what that really means. So let's do that. Let's add one more. So again, you'll remember here I added in components, I added this template image, and then I put that in my collection, which is in here. I put it right there. Well, I want to add a tweet embed. So I want users to be able to like embed a tweet. So template tweet, and then let's put that in here as well, and save it. Oops. Save it, and then so now we've got that, and it's going to error because well, because that doesn't exist. We haven't set it up yet. So let's make it. So if we export. Oh gosh, my typing is very bad today. I don't know what's up. All right, so template tweet is pretty much going to look like image. The only difference is we don't need quite as many fields, and I'm not really sure how we should do that. So let's look really quick. I guess we don't need the GitHub. All right. So let's look really quick. How do you even make like a React Twitter embed? Well, that was easy. So you'll see here that there are a ton of things that you could add, and you could add more for all these. You know, any of these are fine. But for this, I just kind of want one, which is Twitter tweet embed. So if we find that in the page, we can see here it is. That's how you add a tweet, and the only prop is tweet ID. So that makes it easy. All right. So again, you want to set the name to whatever the name of the React component is going to be, and I'm going to be super lazy and just import it as it is, so I'm just going to call it that. And then set the label, and this is what shows up in that menu. So I'm just going to say tweet, and when I say menu, I mean this embed thing right here. It'll say tweet. And then the last thing is fields. And we just set up some fields, and we're going to add one field for tweet ID. So so that's a string, and here we can just grab this one and rename it a little bit. And you want to make sure that you get the naming exactly right. So I capitalized it wrong. I want to make sure that I get the right capitalization, so I'll do that. If the name doesn't match, then it won't send it to the props, and it won't work like easy. So we're going to make it as easy as possible. Label. So let's call this tweet ID, and it's a type string. Okay, and we don't really need a description or anything. This should be fine. So this is kind of magical, but this is everything that's needed in order to set that up. So if you look now, at the editor, now we should have, if we refresh, I might need to restart the server, I'll see in a sec. Yeah, but there we go. So we got tweet. Now, oh, and if we try and embed a tweet, let's do it. Embed a tweet, and click on it, and let's set a tweet ID. So I like to use cats to test things. So tweets of cats. Perfect. Okay, so let's share this. So the ID is right there. Now, if I wanted to, I could make a fancier input, kind of like I did with images, where I like do some validation. Maybe I modify the tweet ID, like use the URL and pull it out and get the tweet ID for the user. But I'm not going to do that. You can figure that out. That's in the Tina docs, and there's tons more information about that. But also, we kind of went over it already. All right, so I saved that, and now I've got an image and a tweet, and let's look at the content. So what we created was this, and you can see Twitter tweet embed, and it's got tweet ID, and it's got the correct tweet ID right there. Bam! So easy. Okay, so obviously it's not showing yet. Oh, there's one other thing I want to do. So it's not showing yet because I don't have a component provided for it. So I'll do that really quick. All right, so again, the name of this thing is Twitter tweet embed. So let's just copy that. And we'll go to the page where it's being used. So in this case, that's here. And I don't need to do anything else. I just import it and everything should just work. So import from, and let's get the name, which is React Twitter embed. All right, so when I save that, it's gonna fail because I don't have that file yet. So let's install it. And we'll start it again. And let's refresh. And look at that. Those cute cats. Perfect. Okay, so here's one other thing I want to do. So this image, now this, because I did that height and width thing, it's really hard coded to be like a specific height and width now. So I'm going to use a little bit of style just to fix it so that it's never bigger than the window. So let's just make sort of a sweeping change. The max width is going to be 100%, which means don't ever go bigger than the window or whatever the parent is. And then we're going to set the height to auto, which makes it so now when you make it smaller, now it like kind of fills responsively. Now, I want to do more with this eventually, and we will in a sec, but essentially, like, this is just kind of a demo component to show that you can do stuff on the fly in the front end, and you can do pretty advanced stuff, like messing with this image. I mean, if we wanted to, we could do something crazy, like apply some effects real time, like crop it, do crazy stuff, all in real time, all before it even gets saved into the content file, which is like here. So we don't need to worry about that yet, though. Yeah, maybe another video or something like that, but it should be something you can work out once you have these basics all set up. Okay, so now we have a tweet and we have an image. That's great. All this is set up. It's looking pretty good. So there was one other thing that I kind of brushed over, but I didn't really, I never circled back on it, and I meant to, but I just forgot. So one thing is, like right now we have rows, right? And so if we go here and we look at these rows, if you do one row, it basically just inserts this row right here, but it doesn't have like a way to add individual blocks. Now, the first thing I tried, just without thinking about it, was, oh, well, I'll just make the blocks a list, and that'll make it work, right? But that doesn't work because rich text doesn't handle list equals true. It doesn't have a way to do that. So that's okay. It doesn't really matter because there's another way to generally do that, which is to make an object. So let's do that. And okay, so we're going to say type equals object. And we're going to give this some kind of name. I'm trying to think. I guess block is well enough. Rows, blocks. Yeah, okay. So I'll make it blocks. I tend to worry about like overloading a single name. Like block is something I want to use a lot, like block, block, block. And there's blocks inside blocks and everything's block. But it gets really confusing in the code, and it gets really confusing for the user. So thinking those kind of things through, like, can, I don't know, just help like clarify like what you're trying to do, or what the purpose of that widget is. But for now, this should be okay. It's not a great word. I could probably think of something better. But we've got rows and then blocks. And so let's quickly just, in a comment here, this isn't going to stick around. This is just to help visualize like what we're trying to do. So we want to have a row and row, so we have multiple rows, and then we have block, multiple blocks inside that, and the user can just add as many as they want. So they can have block, 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 block. So in thinking about this, we've already got the row part done, and we're working on the blocks part. So the way to make the same thing as a multiple blocks section would be to do this and then set up fields, and then just put the fields inside that. All right, so now what you end up with is you end up with this kind of shape. So you can build rows and blocks. Now the reason that there's only a single kind of thing that you can have, so you can only have a row here, and you can only have a block here, and it's a single kind of thing. The reason for that is because we're using fields instead of templates. So if I use templates instead, I could do the same kind of thing that we did with this, right, where we set up named templates that are allowed, like options for that thing. And instead of inserting it in the rich text editor, if you put it at this level, it'll let you insert it directly into the thing, so you can have multiple options for what you want to add. Now, we don't really need to do that because I only want one thing to be added, and there's some other considerations. Like I noticed if you use templates here, this stops working, so we don't get the nice name of the item on the list. There's probably some other function. I need to go like look into it to see how to do that, but it's a good reason to maybe really think through, like, is that something we want to do? So anyway, so if I save this, let's see what it looks like. Now, it freaks out. Now this will happen a lot of times when you're changing your schema, but you've already got some content, and we've run into this before. So an easy way to fix it would be to just delete the content, and I'll say, oh, okay, there's no blocks, no problem, and everything works fine. So we've got all our rows, and they've got titles. Oh, that's weird. Probably shouldn't be there. Maybe I need to restart the server. Pretty much always that like fixes any discrepancies between the back end and the front end. And that's just because the GraphQL server doesn't hot reload. So okay, so now we've got an empty page, and we're going to add one row, and we're going to set the title to row 1, and then we're going to add a block, and we're going to say A. Now notice this has a really ugly title. We'll fix that in a sec. But that's the first part. And then if we wanted to do multiple blocks, we could do this, right? And so now we've got A and B in our first row. And let's add another row just to be really clear that everything's working. So row 2, and we'll add a block, and we'll put 1 in this one so we can differentiate. Or 1, there we go. And maybe even make it heading 2. Okay, so now we've got that. And if we go back here, you can see there's 2 rows, and this one has ABC, and this has, or wait, does it just have AB? Yeah, let's give it C too. So it's got ABC, and the other one has 1, 2, or 1. Okay, whatever. Now, a couple things you might notice here that we kind of fixed in the other video, but they're not fixed here. One is, well, this is not a good title. And also these things, it would be maybe helpful if they had a title just so we could tell them apart, so that we know like what blocks we're like messing with, kind of like we did on rows, where we can give them different names and it's easy to see when you like manage them. So let's do those 2 things. So the first problem comes from it comes from no label on on those items. So in page, we didn't set. There's no label here. So if you add a label here, that's what will show up. So let's do that really quick. And let's make the label blocks. Okay, so now if we go into one, we see blocks here, and it's got blocks item, which doesn't really fix that problem, but at least the title isn't ugly. So let's fix the other problem, which we can fix in exactly the same way that we fixed it here. You remember, if you go at the same level as the fields that you're trying to mess with, you can mess with their objects, and you can take the title and do that kind of stuff. So let's do that here, and here's the fields object, so let's put it right before that. And instead of row, let's call it a box. All right, so now we have a row, and inside that we have box, 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 and there is no title, and so we have no way to like set the title, so we'll have to do that as well. So let's take this title and put it into the object's fields, and let's change this to, for this content, block, just so our text is consistent and we're helping the user understand what this is even for. Okay, so now if you go into edit, you'll see the default's box. That's great. And then we can say box A, and now we have a clear idea of like what's going on there. So I'll add some real quick. Box B, and this one's box C. Box, box, box. Okay, so now we have a row with a bunch of boxes, and we've got row 2. Those aren't labeled, so we'll set that. And I don't know, let's add one more. Okay. So one thing you might notice is there's nothing displayed over here. Now the reason is because we haven't told our template how to render what we just did. Like, we just changed the whole shape of how these objects are coming in. They're now coming in a completely different shape. Blocks are no longer it's no longer a single thing. Each one has like a block. You know, it's more complicated, right? So this knows nothing about it. So it's not going to be able to display it. And we're lucky that we didn't get some errors, because we probably could have gotten some errors here if the shape had been a little bit different. But let's fix that. So the last part of that is the template in here, an index. We have to redo the way that this is shaped. So if you think about the shape, I could do a pre and a JSON stringify right here, and I could see like the shape. But another thing too is that you can just look at this and it tells you the shape, right? So it's basically rows, and that's an array, and that has blocks, and that's an array, and then each one, it has block, which is the content. So let's build that. So inside main, we've got rows, which is the first part, and we've got one row, and then we directly have a key there. So let's change this to suction. Again, it doesn't really matter what tags you use here. I just like it because it makes it a little bit easier. And then let's do what's it called again? Row.blocks. And we'll give it a different name there. Okay, so now we've got this, and if we do this, if we put this inside here, we can do block, block, and we get the right stuff. Huh, okay, what did I forget here? Map, closes that. Okay. Now this little remaining red mark is saying I need a key, key equals, and we'll do the same thing that we did with the parent. Now another thing I like to do is I use I when it's just like the index or the iterator, but when I have multiple loops, I like to use the first letter of whatever the thing is, right? So in this case, it's row, so I use R and B and block, right? If you ever have to like dig even deeper than that, like if you had two things that were R's, you know, you can do R1 and R2 or whatever, but it just makes it a little bit easier to follow this. So this is a loop inside a loop. Now, I think here we should do article. And we'll put the key in there. And that way each box has its own tag that we can like hook into. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Now you can see that it didn't really do any structuring. These aren't really like in rows and boxes and that kind of thing, but it did like at least output the content. That's great. It's even doing like the HTML and things like that. So that's awesome. But let's make it actually display like rows and columns and things. So the first thing is we're going to set the section to be display flex. So you can do this however you do it in your thing. I'm just going to use inline CSS because it's really easy and fast. But you know, if you want to use like classes and put it in your style.css, or you want to use like Tailwind or something like that, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. Display flex, and then on this one, we're going to set the style to flex 1. And that should create a kind of like a table or something. Not really a table, but you know, similar sort of layout where it like flexes to fill. If we look at this, you can see no matter what the length is, it will always flex to fill the width of the page there, and it looks pretty good. Now, if you wanted to, at the row level here, you could add more stuff. Like you could add like alignment, for example, and give it like 3 options, like left, right, and center. You know, you could add anything you want here, like the color for the background of this row. If you wanted to like set colors in the UI, you could do that. You can also use UI component. We use that in here. So you can use UI component, and you could create like really fancy color choosers or whatever you want to do there. There is a color component for arbitrary colors for Tina as well. So however you want to do it, that's fine. And then all those things will just come in as props. So in this case, block comes in as the prop here. But you could have it come in however you want. It doesn't really matter. For now, this is probably good enough for that. So let's see. Well, so I guess I'm kind of brushing over the templates thing. Again, the main reason I think is because I know that this won't like update the title, so this logic will be broken. But essentially, the way you would do that is you would go comment that out, and you'd put a oops, I don't think that's the right thing. UI fields. Yeah, so if we commented out fields, and we instead put templates here, it allows you to make like separate types of content that you could put in here instead of it just being a standard block. You could have like a few different kinds. So let's make a couple. So name equals regular, label equals now, sometimes these get pretty confusing because you go like deep into the object, right? So, you know, we've got fields inside fields, and it can be kind of hard to keep track of. But essentially, whatever you put inside here will work just like the original one would. All right. So if we save that, it's probably going to freak out. Yep. Now the reason it freaks out is because I already saved something that has like a totally different format. So again, the easy way to fix that is just to delete everything and restart the server. Well, I don't know if it's easy, but it does work. And again, it's just because they got out of sync. So let's do that. And let's see what we built. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, this comes back to why it's really good to guard like we did here. So let's do that really quick. I don't even know if I'm going to stick with this this format, because again, I only want one kind of block. I don't really want like multiple types, but that will fix it. So here we go. So now we got this. We got 2 rows, and we can add blocks, and now it has like options here. Well, if you make more templates, you can add more things other than regular content box. You could have multiple kinds of boxes that you could add here. The same is true at this level as well. If you wanted to add multiple types of rows, you could do that too. So if you had like some predefined row types, instead of just adding it like the way it does like that, it would show a little menu that looks like that, which is pretty cool. I am going to go back though to the way it was, because I only want one type of thing. There's only one type of row that we're going to be adding here. So let's just back it up just a little bit. And there we go. So now if I go into a row and I try and add, it just adds it directly. It doesn't ask me like, do you want a regular content row or something else, right? All right. So sadly, we had to delete everything in here, but I think if I Control Z here as well, I'll get all my content back. I gotta restart the server, but I should get everything back. And that'll make it easier, so I don't have to like recreate all that stuff. And that's something I do a lot in Tina is I often just edit the file if I need to like fix something. It's sometimes it's faster than like clicking through the UI and all that kind of stuff. But you can see it went back to this, and now we've got like rows and columns, and everything's working correctly. So that's great. You can add whatever you want in here. If you want to add more style, or again, if you wanted to use classes and put those in your style.css, you can totally do that. Okay, so the last thing that I talked about, but I never actually explained, was Cloudinary. Now, this seems like a big subject, but it is actually really simple. So first, let's talk about like why you would want to do that. So Tina's built-in media manager works pretty good. It's got like, it just grabs files from the folder and it just shows them in the UI, and we've been pretty happy with that. Like for so far for our image, it works pretty good, right? This is pretty nice. But there's a lot of situations where you would want to put your image files somewhere else. So one good reason for that is it's nice to keep your code and your content, which are both text formats. It's nice to keep those in Git, but Git doesn't really handle like non-text like very well for like diffs and things like that. So you end up like with not very pretty like differences when you're looking at like an image changing. And so it's not really giving us that much to store it in our repo. If we had like thousands of images, which is entirely possible on like a serious blog, right? You could have just so many images, and sorting through them all in your repo and having to like clone the entire like collection of images whenever you clone like the code and the content, that could be really, really, it could take a long time. So to speed things up and to not have our code inside GitHub, one option would be Cloudinary or some other image management thing. Tina happens to have a bunch of stuff ready-made for Cloudinary, and I think it's a really good choice. So we'll start with that. Another reason you might want to use Cloudinary is, so our cool image thing, right, that we set up in here, this template image, it has like this height and width stuff. Well, eventually I want to do some cool stuff with that. Now, Cloudinary has built-in things where you can take, like if you have a known URL, you can just add some stuff to the end of the URL, and you can do amazing things like detect the person's face in the picture, and it'll like highlight that and crop around that. Or, oh man, it has so many, like drop out the background. or like blur everything that's not a person. That kind of thing is pretty cool, and it's pretty much automatic if you are using Cloudinary. So you don't have to write any code to like process images or, you know, train an AI to like be able to detect faces, things like that. You don't have to do any of that stuff. They already did all that for you. And it's free too. So I don't know, why not? All right, so to do that, you go into your schema.js in the .tina folder, and this is the setup for if you just have a folder, right? But if you have like if you have your own thing, you can just put it in here. So if you put load custom store, it'll do its own thing. Now, these directions are actually right here on this site. So maybe I should just go through this like step by step instead. So the first thing is I don't use yarn, I use npm. So I'll just do npm I. I'll install this thing. And then, and I guess I could just start it so I can see stuff on the fly. I think it should work now. Okay, so this is the first time that we've talked about any configuration at all, but you do need to like set up some configuration. And that's just because it needs to have like your API keys and stuff. So they, handily, they provide this m.example, but you have to make sure that you edit it and like change things. So I'm going to show you my key here. I'm going to change it right after this video, but I'll show you my key so you can see it. So this is like how I set it up. So I'm still leaving these out. I'm leaving them, they're just empty strings, it's fine. But I am setting the branch to main, which makes it so it knows what branch to use. And I am setting all of my secrets for Cloudinary. And this is the only one that's really a secret. And these ones get passed to the front end, and the front end can use it. So anything that has a next underscore in it, Next.js will just pass to the front end. So make sure that you're very careful about what you allow to go to the front end. It shouldn't be a secret. This, you know, you never want to show this. So again, I'm going to change this right away, but you don't want to show this to anyone else, and you don't want to share it, and you don't want it to ever be seen in the public code that gets built for the Next.js front end. So so make sure you don't put a next at the beginning. Okay, so now I'm going to save this. Instead of env.example, I'm going to save this as env, and that gives us the environment variables that we need to like do Cloudinary. So the other step, actually there's a few other steps. So then we'll look over here, and it says we need to register our media store. And so this is that part that I already did with the load custom store, so we got that. And then Next.js has this thing where if you put things in page API, it automatically will treat it not as a React component, but as a API endpoint, which means like no React gets rendered. And so we have to make sure that we make this file. Now I use JavaScript instead of TypeScript, and you can do that, and it's totally fine. So let's do that. And I think I probably need some quotes, or maybe I need some square brackets, just to make sure that this doesn't try and like do something funny in my terminal. And again, I'll change this to JS. That's totally fine. Uh-oh. Well, I think it doesn't like, it's probably something, there's some magic characters in there that it just doesn't like. I think maybe if I... Boy. Oh, I see the problem. Okay. So I need to make the directory. So pages API Cloudinary, and then okay. So that made this file inside here, and it, it's right there. And then let's grab this one, and we, handily we can just take all their code and just put it right in there, and we're ready to go. All right, so if I start this, I may have some images that are broken if I haven't synced up like my nice Tina image. I got rid of that, that's not in the content, so nothing will be broken, but keep that in mind. You might have to like copy some files over to your Cloudinary. But let's see how this works. I want to see if this is actually working. So let's add a new row. We'll call it image, and I'll just give it one block or one box, and I'll embed an image, and I'll click on it, and let's see what we get. Well, this is our local file system. It's still local. So I think I know why, though. So if we look here, you can see that it's using development. Well, first of all, it should be a triple equal, so my linter will leave me alone. And then this assumes that the node m is development, which I don't think we've ever set that up. So let's just make sure that it's set up. So in here, you can go node m equals development, and this will pass this environment variable into this command when it tries to run this. So now it should bypass all authentication. It should just load. So let's see what happens. Still seeing files here, local files. It's odd. Oh, you know what? I never saved my schema. So it doesn't know that it should use a custom store. So I'll save that, and it looks like it restarted, so that's good. It probably works fine. Let's add another row. And right now, it just went to the remote site, and it from Cloudinary, it got a list of files. So they have some nice samples and stuff just built in. As I said, I love to test with cats, so I'm going to test with this cute little guy right here, and look at that. Okay. And yeah, if we refresh this, everything's working. So that's how easy it is to set up Cloudinary. And you can see it even has that styling that we put in on the images where it's responsive and all that. Everything is so cool. Okay, so I guess that's it. That's pretty much everything I went over. Be sure to read more about all this stuff in the TinaCMS docs. They have excellent documentation, so just go through it. And they're also on Discord, and they're very, very helpful. So, there's a lot of places where you can get more ideas or more help on kind of setting this stuff up. But that's probably it for me. Okay. Have fun.